Hey folks, this is the Love of Cinema podcast. We like to talk movies. If you like to talk movies too, you have come to the right place.
It's interesting because see, Vikram was the kind of guy we hated in college. So when I found Vikram, I found the film, right? So I found the film because if you make a film, so we make a film about ourselves through the eyes of a guy we hated, right? And if you sort of understand him and then you allow him to see us, that's why I think Hazaaron will work forever. Because it's not Vikram gives that film that balance.
Hey everyone, this is Himanshu, and you're listening to the Love of Cinema podcast. Welcome back. Much excited about this episode. But before that, in case you're a new listener, and if you like this episode, do check out past episodes of the podcast. You can find all past episodes wherever you listen to your podcast. Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or any of the other podcast apps. Love of Cinema podcast is a place for long-form, freewheeling conversations centered around Indian cinema and streaming shows. So if you enjoy similar conversations, do consider subscribing. Also, please do rate and review the podcast in iTunes, as that will help others with similar taste discover this podcast. So if you rate and review us, it will be much appreciated. And don't forget to share with your friends an episode which you liked. Back to today's episode. Here's a question. What do Jaane Bhi Do Yaro, Khamosh, Mohan Joshi Hazir Ho, Is Raat Ki Subah Nahi, and Hazaaron Khwaishein Aisi have in common? Well, besides that they are some of my favorites, they have all been touched by Sudhir Mishra in some capacity or other. Mishra co-wrote the cult classic Jaane Bhi Do Yaro with Kundan Shah, co-wrote Khamosh with Vidhu Vinod Chopra, and wrote the dialogues for Saeed Akhtar Mirza's Mohan Joshi Hazir Ho. Mishra would go on to make some of the most influential films of the last 30 years. Films like Dharavi, Is Raat Ki Subah Nahi, Khoya Khoya Chand, and of course, Hazaaron Khwaishein Aisi. He continues to be one of the most compelling filmmakers working in Hindi cinema today. And one of the year's most eagerly awaited projects remains his adaptation of Manu Joseph's Serious Man for Netflix. A recipient of multiple awards, including the National Award, one of the biggest compliments Mishra could have received, and I think he will agree with me when I say this, came from Kundan Shah. When speaking of Jaane Bhi Do Yaro, Kundan Shah had once said, "People call my film black comedy, but Sudhir is the one with the truly dark humor." I've always liked Mishra's cinema for its non-judgmental storytelling and the immensely palpable, flawed characters. Also, politics, although almost always a backdrop in his films, is never allowed a broad brush. Another facet of his films, which I admire. Two of his films are big favorites of mine. 2005's Hazaaron Khwaishein Aisi is one of them. It's compassionate, troubling, and some might argue, prophetic. Hazaaron Khwaishein Aisi, while relentlessly involved with its characters, churns with furious energy as it plunges into the intense story of three friends during the tumultuous 70s. A crucial period in the history of India, especially for the young generation that was just finding its feet during that decade. Hazaaron does not exploit or condescend, does not overemphasize for contrived effect, does not contain silly and shallow sidebars, but simply looks, with a passionately examining eye, at a rather turbulent time in the collective consciousness of a generation. On this episode, writer-director Sudhir Mishra joins me for a deep dive into the influential and astonishingly relevant film which turns 15 this year. Mishra shared memories, talked about the writing, the casting, and the haunting music of the film. We also spoke about how every generation, is entitled to its own heartbreak. We also spoke about the current political climate and how he continues to be one of the few balanced voices on Twitter in this never ceasing season of polarization. He also spoke about his upcoming Netflix series, Serious Man. Here's our chat. Sudhir, thanks a lot again for coming on the podcast. I want to talk about a film which I believe is increasingly relevant in today's times. And also, since it completes 15 years this year, I thought this would be a nice time to have a chat with you. And you were kind enough to join us. So thanks a lot again.
It's quite fascinating to see how its longevity and the fact that it keeps connecting. Because when I made the film, I remember a lot of older people, the generation that I talk about in the film that I grew up loving and admiring, those guys moved to tears. And I remember Shekhar Kapoor sitting for about 15 minutes after the film was over. He was in tears and he looked at me, that's wonderful. And he said, thank you. And then he said, how many people I hope people, the younger lot, get the film. But, over the years, I've, more and more young people see it. So it's fascinating. Now it's on Netflix. So again, people are seeing it. It's quite amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. So it must be because, there's some resonance and it's about, sometimes, films happen and they become, if you manage to make a film which kind of goes beyond its immediate subject, in a sense, immediacy of or its time and it becomes like a story which or a film which kind of speaks to that kind of issue or those kind of it's about human desire and aspirations. It's about I think the film is about those remnants of beauty that get left behind after youth fades and you what you hold on to, right? So it's also about that. It's about coming of age. It's also about a time in India. It's about a generation that kind of thought about something else beyond themselves. It's about a generation that may have failed, but there's something very beautiful in their attempt. And they made a lot of mistakes, and here we are today. But then we are again in a time when the youth are again sort of in some kind of ferment and they are entitled to their own heartbreaks, and they will get into their own heartbreaks but
sure,
they're entitled, right?
Right. The way when I first saw it, I saw it in the late 2000s, and the way I saw it was, on one level, it's essentially a story of three friends and their changing relations over a course of 8 years. But on one level, it's also a portrait of innocence lost. It's also about a generation, like you said, whose tryst with kind of idealism failed to some extent. And I also saw it on a political level as a attempt to kind of reevaluate an entire generation's heady affair with the left during that particular time. When you set out to write the film, were you really thinking about all of these things, or these things essentially kind of manifested them over time?
Yeah, it depends on everybody has a different process. So I kind of wanted to make a film about that generation in a sense, and me and my co-script writer kind of sat a lot. His name is Shiv Kumar Subramaniam. And we sat a lot thinking about. We started out with a totally different film, and the idea was there's a I don't know if this generation knows a man called Frantz Fanon. So he wrote a book called. He was a psychiatrist.
Yes.
And he kind of in a sense, grew out of the Algerian movement for independence, but he was, you know, he saw the effects of French occupation, and so there were since he was a psychiatrist, there was a particular case study of his which had interested me, and which sort of, so I was thinking around that, and then I don't know how we reached here. So for me, it's the process. I mean, for me, you try and discover something, and the act of writing, I don't sort of start off with saying this is the film I'll make, or you have an idea, something interests you, you want to probe, and sometimes it works. So in the case of Hazaaron, it kind of works, and I think it's also the every filmmaker is meant to make some 5, 6 films, right? And I think Hazaaron is a film that, and when you find something that only you can make, right? That's when it works best. And so my whole background, kind of prepared me to make the film like that, right? So I'm a left-leaning mathematician's son, agnostic. I come from a so-called upper caste family, but those that have kind of rejected the traditional norms. So I come from a meat-eating, idea-loving, whiskey-loving family. I don't drink that much whiskey though, and so it's kind of different. And my father is a mathematician. Uh, my maternal grandfather was a doctor. Uh, I was meant to be a doctor because the eldest son, and then I wandered into cinema. And but on my maternal side, there was this. My grandfather was a kind of freedom fighter. Then went into, like many Congress leaders, went into politics and then became the chief minister of MP. So I saw that kind of power and a kind of failure of idealism even there, no? In one sense,
Right.
if you see their beginnings and you see their end, right? And then I saw it in terms of my father and the Nehruvian scientific temperament and that kind of love for that, and then how it got transformed and how Mrs. Gandhi came in and hijacked the party and what happened there. And then, you also had seen the left and all of us had our own romance with the left, which is rejected the Congress party at that time. And so this whole upsurge against the Congress, you know. So all that, I had kind of known quite closely amongst my family, friends, elder brothers, sisters, people whom I admired, and I think there was a man called Badal Sarkar who had kind of opened my head.
I
So
see.
from
Okay.
the dogma, right? So I was never, uh, I mean, also I think Badal Sarkar and the fact that I'm a mathematician's son, I could look at something in the eye, and like many filmmakers of a kind of generation when the wall collapsed or the Soviet Union collapsed, they ran out of their ends and they didn't know how to finish their film because they thought the revolution had failed or the revolution had betrayed them. But I mean, I saw it as a continuum, right? And whatever happened, and these are phases, and life escapes kind of ideology, and that's the point of science. I think that you observe certain things and you have certain theories, but then sometimes they fail, and then you have to look at things anew. So I think all that prepared me. I don't know if I'm rambling, but I think all that prepared me to make a film like Hazaaron.
Oh, no. Please go on. Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. It makes perfect sense.
and so I mean, there's in mathematics, there's probability, and it's I don't know. It's whatever it was. I don't try and examine myself that much, but
Okay,
yeah, I mean, I think if you kind of prepare yourself and you sometimes a kind of story finds you,
absolutely.
and then
Yes.
if you start listening to the people whom who populate that story, then they kind of tell you some things, and it's an act of also listening as much as than putting it down. And it's an interaction with your original thoughts, and you allow it to go where it goes. So in Hazaro, I had no. I mean, if there is any flaw in the film, it's mine. If it's because nobody told me what to do, everybody was new, so I had that great freedom to in a sense literally direct the film and take it to where I want to take it. So even Swanand as a lyric writer is new. Shantanu Mohitra as a music director. These are all their first films, right?
Right.
Shiny first film, Chitrangada's first film. Right? Most of the Ram Kapoor's first film. There's so many people so they were all, they had no baggage. And I also sort of wanted to sort of kind of explore it as almost as if it's the first film I'm making. I knew the locations, I knew where to go, I know most of those characters or the kind of characters that I'm writing about. Uh, I know. I mean, I'm not from Bihar, but I know place. I know an Indian village. It's a kind of it depends on your background, and I think every filmmaker should sort of listen to what the medium is telling you to do. I mean, that you can use me like this. You can interact with me with this subject matter, and then I'll help you along. So the kind of medium is bigger than us, I think.
Yes. Yes.
It's bigger. Everybody's film is better than the person, more or less. Because it's medium also that's fascinating, and there's so many other interactions that happen. And if you follow that gut, and I think I sort of discovered myself also during that film in a sense. Then I again lost myself a bit, and I'm coming back. But
Right.
it's also a continuous process of trying to find yourself.
Self-discovery. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that the film does, which I really like, is that it questions all kind of ideologies and their means.
Yeah.
Siddharth's father questions the means undertaken by the Naxals. Vikram questions if all the fundamentalists, socialists, and communists can even work together. That aspect of the film I really liked because I thought it was like an honest evaluation of all those
Yeah.
ideologies.
Also, I mean, it's interesting because see, Vikram was the kind of guy we hated in college. So when I found Vikram, I found the film, right? So I found the film because if you make a film, so we make a film about ourselves through the eyes of a guy we hated, right? And if you sort of understand him and then you allow him to see us, that's why I think Hazaro will work forever. Because it's not a, it, 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 Vikram gives that film that balance. So, I mean, you're looking at yourself through somebody else's eyes. And if you can reach inside him, uh, because you've already reached inside yourself quite a bit, but if you also see his view of yourself, then it's interesting. And I think that's
Mm,
what I found in the film. That there are points of views, and you are not judgmental, and ultimately the fixer becomes the and does the right thing. At the end.
Right.
And the revolutionary kind of walks away. But I'm not very judgmental about the revolutionary either, because if he went into a way that was wrong, it's a right thing to sort of wander away and find himself in medicine and something else. I mean, many people like Siddhar went in the World Bank and became the opposite. So, I mean, I've been a little kind to the Siddharth character.
Right, right. Well, yeah, but I absolutely agree. It's a process of evolving. You evolve from your ideologies and your thoughts. Uh, Sudhir, I wanted to talk about one particular scene from the film which I really like, and I would love to hear your take on this and what you were thinking when you were making that. The scene I'm talking about is Vikram's marriage procession, which, while passing through the streets, gets flanked by a group of protesters from the JP Andolan of the mid 70s who happen to be passing in the opposite direction. And we see that Vikram is, perched atop a horse with posters of JP looming large by his sides. There's no respite from the revolution, so to speak, for Vikram, even on the day of his wedding. And it's a nice scene. I love that scene because it kind of harks back to the opening of the film where the introductory text says, a time when India was being pulled in 1,000 directions. The procession and the march kind of going in two opposite directions, literally as well as symbolically.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. I'm glad. That's also something that happens in a film, and I mean, it's how the country or the entire politics of the country also moves simultaneously with our own lives and affects us, and we affect it, and in a sense. So he's getting married at that time where the country is about to erupt, and sort of in a sense a foreboding of things to come, where he will get caught in this, in a sense, and he gets caught in this because of love or attachment to another human being. So in a sense, I mean, I think it's. I'm glad somebody. I mean, very few people get that scene. But because they see it as just some procession, because then later a younger generation has lost the memory of JP. Or Lohia is also there.
Yes. And before I forget, I wanted to ask you, is the character played by Aditya Bhattacharya a thinly veiled Sanjay Gandhi, or am I just reading too much into it?
Well, that type, no. I mean, in the sense that, if you because, I mean, I'm talking about the essence of the kind of person who kind of brutalized India in a sense, right? It could be him. It doesn't pull any punches, the film. I mean, it's that Mrs. Gandhi declared the emergency, right? So, I mean, you could see that scene between Aditya Bhattacharya and the other Anil Sharma character and the bank manager, bank head, Shiny as, sort of in a sense, indicating something of a kind of a Nagarwala case which happened at that time, right? So I mean, you could say that, but I'm not being, because I don't know. It's about what happens when power becomes monstrous and wants to retain itself at every cost, and then the idealism of what got you or propelled you to power is lost somewhere in the foolishness of trying to keep it, and the brutality that ensues. It's a. So you could, I mean, I don't mind if you see him as Sanjay Gandhi. He's certainly, I tried to, in a way, determine his look a bit to suggest that he could be modeled on him. So I haven't called him Sanjay.
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
So I'm not, I mean, in the film, Mrs. Gandhi also appears in a very brief flash, and that she declared the emergency is a fact, right? And film sort of talks about it. The with the Randhir's character played by Yashpal Sharma,
Oh,
you go
yes,
into a
yes.
lot of details about all the comedy which led to a kind of a tragedy in a sense. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I have no. If people, I mean, I think that a good film, allows people to also their own film. So I think that's what Hazaro allows. I've seen the film with the IAS Wives Association. Now, why do they love that film? I saw a whole screening where they were all clapping, right? So I mean, why? But maybe they like Gita. Maybe you know, maybe there's a dormant Gita in everyone, in every woman, right? And I think the film. I think over the years, as I understand it, and as I see different people reacting to it, I kind of I kind of see the um, that it relates to different people at different. I mean, some people just see it like a love story.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, so it could be seen as a tale of friendship, right?
Yes,
It,
yes.
it could be seen as a tale of a generation. So, I mean, a good film, I mean, that's the value of a good story also, that you could approach it from many sides. And you can find your own film within the film,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
And so a lot of people will see it differently, right? And
yeah.
I quite like that, I mean, because filmmaking is a conscious, is also an unconscious act, no? I mean, we are not aware of everything that we are doing, right? And a lot of what is inside us comes from various sources, right? And it is also in the heads of many people, and I've just articulated it better, maybe, right? So many people have felt similar things, right? And they find something in that poem or in the film or in a book, or they find some articulation of their thoughts, and you know I mean, all films do is maybe offer solace, no? I mean, what does cinema do? Ultimately, I don't know, it creates revolutions or anything, but it offers solace to those who happen to think and have not been able to articulate it in that way, or you speak for a number of people.
Right.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah, yeah. I think the one of the reasons why the film is so admired and well loved is because, like you said, it's so many things rolled into one. So it's a story of friendship. Some have seen it as love story, I guess. It's also political film, obviously. But like you said, I mean, it's like any piece of art. People are going to interpret it and read it with based upon their own lives and their experiences, as well as what they're seeing in front of their eyes.
Yeah, because what is content ultimately? Because in film schools they demarcate all this form and content and all that. But you have a subject matter, and your technique or your viewpoint about life kind of interacts with that with that subject matter. And technique is different from technology. So I mean, it's the viewpoint of the director, and that in the heads of an audience creates content, right? I mean, so the content is, I mean, without the viewer there is no content, and for different people the content will be slightly different if the film is good, if the film has a value beyond the immediacy.
Now, towards the end of the film, Siddharth goes to London and, through a letter, voices his disillusion, so to speak, with the idea of revolution. And some have argued that by the end, the film's almost a powerful indictment of the left, lost in its naive, romanticism of an ideology. And that the title of the film kind of rises from there, that those who romanticize with that ideology are nurturing 1,000 desires in their heart, and all of them unfulfilled.
Yeah, but that's everybody. There is kind of everything is like a half story, and every desire. I mean that's why Ghalib. I mean, otherwise a lot of people haven't asked. Not asked by a film about the emergency at that time. It's called Hazaaron Khwaishein Aisi, and what the hell does Ghalib have to do with revolution, right?
Right.
But I mean, yeah. So I mean, I don't know if it's I mean, I don't know if it's an indictment or if you try and kind of fit life into an ideology, if you want to fit different social conditions, different things, a different country into an ideology which evolved somewhere else, and if you try and force fit things from an ideology from another time into a new time, and if you're not, open to the findings that an experiment throws up, and then if you kind of close your eyes, then you are only people of faith, right? And life and the world and nature doesn't respect faith, no? So I mean, you can call it an indictment, or you can, I mean, but it's I mean, I'm very I kind of love that generation, but yeah, I can see the flaws, and I can see that it's sort of that insistence on a methodology, and then not being responsive when that methodology fails is part of the reason why the left is where it is.
Right, right. And it can also be
I mean,
argued that has led to the rise of the right as well.
I think so, and I think so. I mean, I very sincerely believe in that, actually. That failure of the left not to understand the world as it is, and the working class change in such dramatic ways, and the social conditions being so dramatically different, and to confuse the good of many with state capitalism, and the state running things, and far from being the state dissolving, the state becoming more and more intrusive. Then it's a heading for trouble, and that's what happened. And that's what happens many times. But then the people involved are, or the people that kind of sometimes get swayed by an ideology, or find solace in something, or find a common group because they have been orphaned by this by another kind of state machinery. They kind of grope for answers, and sometimes that disparate group of farmers and industry workers and left intellectuals and rich kids revolting against their parents or the establishment, or upper caste people sort of in a self-deprecatory way trying to declass or decaste themselves. I mean, that wasn't bad, right? I mean, there was something there, and it's just that everything after a while, it's also human frailty, and it's very difficult to be altruistic, and
Oh, yes.
it's a tough one, I mean, to just condemn it would be easy. So I'm not one of those condemners of the left in that sense, but I can see its failure. I can see its inability to not be able to evaluate themselves, and they're almost sticking on to an ideology as if it's the new faith, or it's the new religion. Right. So I mean that is quite and to expect people to change when you order them to it's like America trying to export democracy like a chocolate,
Right.
which kind of keeps exploding in America's face, but they never learn. You know, so I mean, in that sense, I mean, everybody who it's a kind of a what are we? I'm not quite 100% sure what we are fighting here, whether we are fighting ourselves or our basic natures, or that human beings, when they acquire power, and if you give too much power in any way to someone, what it leads to. So that's why I think even like the famous line of revolutions eating their children.
Yes,
But
yes.
I think the idea of the left, not the idea of state capitalism, not the left, which means parties, right? But as a way of looking at life, and saying that, for instance, uh, what do the resources of the world, who do they belong to, and what can be privatized and what can't be, and that the commodification of everything will lead to some kind of a disaster. Uh, there's wider ideas of the left, which if we don't sort of listen to, we are heading for quite a big disaster, I think. So this easy condemnation of I mean, I'm all for condemning a lot of established left parties, because they've totally failed and they've failed to reinvent themselves. And I mean, I find it really funny that, communist parties of India do lal salam to Stalin, which is kind of weird. So, I mean, that kind of one party rule and a kind of a state sort of as an omnipresent force governing every aspect of people's lives, of stifling the entrepreneurship of individuals. But there's nothing wrong with entrepreneurship, whether it's creative. It's like I cannot make films according to a state policy. So, I mean, I think people are, I, I don't think the idea of the left should be to stifle individual in entrepreneurship. Or it should be that everybody should get a fair start in life, and then the idea that everybody is equal is a foolish idea. But that everybody should more or less get some basics and have the same starting points. And if you cannot say that Dalits should not be given some kind of whether you call it subsidy or you call it reservation, or there's an American term for it, some kind of an
Affirmative
action.
action. Yes.
Beg your pardon?
Affirmative action.
Affirmative action, is not is kind of a correct idea, and it's what we owe to, I mean that's democracy, I mean, and that's what we owe to, and that's kind of scientific, because who knows where the genius or the flaw is, it's like trying to kill half the forest or try to burn the Amazon forest, So I think
Right.
greed-filled, rampant carpetbagger uh, capitalism also is this idea of billionaires deciding what the world will be, and then funding where only what they think should be funded is also a dangerous idea. I mean, if 20 people are there, but I
Oh,
mean, they may have,
absolutely.
some of them
Yes,
may have
yes.
very good intentions, but if say 10 tech billionaires decide what the fate of the world will be, it's kind of crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean,
Now,
which doesn't mean that they should. I mean, but some people have not done good. I mean, Bill Gates being some kind of an example.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, so it's not that what I think it's the idea of charity and the condescension that they bring, and that you are giving charity, and that those basics are not human rights. I think those are interesting ideas that have evolved from the left, or whether it's copyright, whether it's the women empowerment of women, whether it's working hours. I mean, there's so many things that are left ideas which have now been incorporated by the world, and we take them for granted. So I think that evolution is interesting and nice, and I don't think it's about political parties or somebody controlling something.
Oh, yeah, I agree with you.
Everything.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Now, I
it,
know
it,
you're adapting Manu Joseph's Serious Men for the screen. And I find that very interesting because I feel often your lines as in the lines which you wrote for your films, and Manu's writing have a similar air to them. For example, the whole disillusion of Siddharth's character with the romanticism of revolution kind of beautifully ties in with one of Manu's very popular lines from one of his books, The Illicit Happiness of Other People. And the line, of course, is the most foolish description of the young is that they're rebellious. Couple other lines from the films too, which I feel if you had not already written 15 years ago, probably Manu would have written in one of his novels during the past decade. Lines like our setup is a bourgeois feel-good scheme. Delhi and Bhojpur are not merely separated by 1,000 miles, but also by 5,000 years. Do you guys share a similar worldview?
I'm not sure. Sometimes I think we do. Sometimes I think we don't. But yeah, but I find him a very interesting mind.
Okay.
I mean,
And do
some
you?
people complain that he's from the right. I mean, a lot of my left friends would say that he's from the right. I don't think so. And he's a very interesting man who can, and he's quite brutal in his examination, and I find that interesting. I mean, if even if you sort of put him on the right, then I would. I mean, I don't mind interacting or being provoked or being challenged by that view of the right. I
Yes.
think he's a brilliant mind. And it's very difficult to make a film. So, Serious Men, I hope the lovers of the book, right, don't because when we Bhavesh Mandalia, one of script writers, who's also one of the co-producers. So, I mean, we kept Manu abreast of everything that we were doing, and from the transformation from the book to the to the script to the film is you know makes it depart a lot from the book. So I mean, because I think every story kind of finds its medium. So some things can be done best in a novel, and some things
Absolutely.
can
Yeah.
be done best in a painting, and something can be done best in a poem. And so you can't really shoot a poem, right? And you can't really shoot a novel. You can't. You have to take some ideas from it which interest you, and then make a film. And Manu's told me that I mean, he likes the film and the book, the film and the script and the film so much because we've just managed to reach some kind of first cut. We're still working on it. The
Okay.
post production will take about 2-3 months. But he said I could write another novel based on your film, right? So that's wonderful the way he interacts and the way he's open to the fact, and he's very secure in the knowledge that you can't take away his book from him, and the book will be who he is, and the lovers of the book will you know remain lovers of the book, and he's sort of seeing some of his ideas transformed into a film by someone else, and he's enjoying that process, you know. So I mean, we're all feeding into each other, and he's seeing it like his ideas entering a script writer's head and into a director's head, and then getting transformed into something else. And that's what he enjoys, right? And he loved the process, and we gave him every draft. He was there half the time during the shooting, and I really loved interacting with him. He's a brilliant man.
And do you yourself get a feeling that some of the lines that he writes, this you could have easily written them a few years ago, or the other way around when you?
Yeah. I like his description of me. He wrote after he saw last film. I like his description of me also. He says, "I'm the collector of frail men."
Right.
So I kind of, I mean, I think so. I mean, I would have, like for example, in Serious Men lines, like why the first robos failed, because man was trying to make them in his own image. Searching, and that's why searching for aliens. You're trying to find aliens like yourself. That's not called science. It's kind of called loneliness. You're looking for people like yourself. They might not be there. So I mean, it's quite very interesting the way he. But we've not made his book, and I would beg people of that love that book to keep loving the book and see the film as ideas borrowed from Manu Joseph's worldview and life and books, and then transformed into a film. And they just see the film as another entity, influenced by Manu. Definitely influenced by him, some of his characters. Definitely, you can't have made this film without that book being there.
Coming back to the film, Sudhir, let's talk about the film's relevance today, which I would argue is even more so than it was 15 years ago. And I could go on about it, but I would love to hear what you would like to say.
But, I think, I mean, if it is relevant, that means I managed to capture something essential of the human spirit and how history keeps not repeating itself, but finding new ways of how rebellion is and tyranny sort of are fundamental needs of human beings, or that's the way the cycle of life goes. That sometimes as human beings we submit ourselves to tyranny, or the majority of us. So then the minority is. So I mean, I think it's and then rebellion follows, because then those that get crushed by that tyranny react. And I think the same is happening today. Around the world, I think people would. I mean, tyrants are kind of ruling, but I think people also had some kind of need to submit to tyranny. I mean, what is Trump about, or what is our present government about? So I think it will find resonance even today. And I think Hazaaron will find resonance at most points, Because I think we managed to. It's kind of you could also call it luck. just something happened when we made that. It happened because we didn't go into the film with any preconceived notion. We allowed the events and stories as they unfolded to guide us a lot. So we didn't. The film was not. It was also a lot of credit to Pratish Nandi, the producer, or just the fact that at that moment I was reacting to being controlled by another film that I was making, and I think I just allowed myself to flow with the thoughts that were engulfing me and ideas that came from other people and
right.
My whole background and life as I had seen it, and I think if you remain true to a kind of craft, you can call it, for want of a better word, a kind of craft, craft means if you respect the idea of filmmaking and stories, so call it what you want, then uh, I think if you allow characters to speak and if you don't, and whatever, when they speak through you, but you don't try and stifle them, then I think it works. And that's why I think it finds a resonance today,
Right.
because there must be some essential truths there.
Now, the film opens with some wonderful text. This is a story of my imaginary siblings' lives in those times when India was being pulled in 1,000 directions. I know that you have talked about making a sequel to this film. What would the introductory text be to that sequel?
Yeah, difficult one. But yeah, I mean,
Anything you have thought about?
what would be the sequel? What would be sequel?
Oh,
That
yes, that's the first question, right?
Siddharth and Gita's child, and Siddharth and so I mean, the radicals become. I mean, because if you see that all the radicals of that time have either died or become the new oppressors or got scared and are hiding in holes. So I don't know. I think every generation is entitled to its own heartbreak. Should be the line. Everything begins anew and has elements of the past and the past tries to keep controlling the present, but the present maybe escapes, and hopefully it will, because if it doesn't escape this time, if from now here on, if the present doesn't escape the past, then we are done for as a world. If most things are not reinvented, and if we don't go past our basic natures, and we do not allow, the Bhavara ones the minds to wander and to, hold hands with each other, in a sense. And if we don't, I mean, we are fucked totally. I don't think after this you're going to get another chance. I think Greta Thunberg is right.
This is the last chance.
I think this is maybe the last chance. I don't know if I'm sounding alarming. I still think that human beings will manage at some precipice. They will pull back.
Yeah. I mean, the whole entire history of humankind is littered with instances, right, where humankind has somehow prevailed.
Yeah, and I think you have to forgive humankind, because this was the only time. I mean, it's like a life lived, and it's like if life is short, and I mean, by the time you understand it, you're already sort of right. Except very very few lucky ones. But then humankind, this was the first time they encountered the mind, and they had no control over it, and it led them into disaster areas. And by the time, I hope they learn to control this thing called the mind, which is sort of like we have very little control on. It seems to wander off in very dangerous areas. And I think we need to, I mean, that's really necessary at this moment. But I think we will be. I think humankind it's too, I mean, maybe some disaster will occur, but I think, survival will dictate that.
And finally, let's talk about the music. The music is simply haunting. And there are essentially only two songs. But what can you tell us about the music? Any interesting anecdotes?
Well, I mean, I had a assistant. His name was Swanand Kirkire on the film, right?
Okay.
And so as the music, I mean, I had no thoughts about the music as I was making it. I didn't go in with the idea of music when I started shooting, and then as I was shooting, certain songs started coming in my head, and as I was shooting, Kumar Gandharv, I mean, whose music I used to listen to, or Ghalib kept coming in. The film was called Tryst with Destiny before, and then, Pritish said, yeah, no, that's not the right name for the film, and then think of something else. And then I said Hazaaron Khwaishein, and he said, bang on. And some things started evolving, and I think, then Swanand was singing, used to sing, he had sort of worked on Bavraman a bit, and he sort of sang it one day, and I said, fuck, this is the right song. And then
Right.
I said, this is the right voice. So it's also, I mean, I'm telling you, there's a lot to do with if you work and are faithful and you accept the right people, because you work with many people in a film, right? And you could have a vision, but if there is no one to execute it, then it's so much ideas in the air. They don't get transformed into a film. So the filmmaking, I think, is a lot about casting. Not just casting the actors, but casting everybody in the film. Shows that
Right.
if you
Right.
have
Assembling
a
the
vision,
crew.
if you have a vision, then you have to cast the DOP, you have to cast the, because you can't make people fundamentally change or dictate totally what they will do. I mean, transform a DOP who has an inclination for something else. So I think, if you found the right DOP, you found the right, and then Shantanu Moitra awarded in. Aditya Bhattacharya introduced me to him, and he sort of said something. And this is Shantanu's first film.
Yes.
Yeah. So and it's Swanand's first film, and I think the music kind of, and then when the Hazaaron Khwaishein Aisi came into my, the title came, and then Ghalib came into my head as I was shooting, and then when Shantanu came in, he had worked with Shobha Mudgal, and he'd done an album with her. And then I said, why don't we get Shobha, and that voice itself will hold. So I didn't want too much music in the film. So there is something else which kind of lifts the film beyond the immediate. Right. So then her voice sort of, I mean, Hazaaron is also incomplete without Shobha Mudgal's voice.
Yeah, it lends a different dimension to it.
Mention to it, when even her voice, So I mean, I think it's just my inclination. When Shobha Mudgal happened to be Kumar Gandharv's, the music, the voice of Kumar Gandharv had always obsessed me, And then that she comes from the same school. I mean, she's his pupil almost. So Swanand has grown up, and I mean, now these are accidents, right? Swanand has grown up in Kumar Gandharv's lap because his parents were his pupils.
Yes, I've heard that story.
So I mean, somehow all this Ghalib and Kumar Gandharv kind of joined, in my head, and I
That's
found
wonderful.
these people,
That's
and
just magical.
then I chose those songs to put, and that's why I deliberately haven't used Bavraman in the film at all. Through the film, I haven't put it in the background much, except once it kind of fleetingly comes and goes, and then when the film happens and the last shot of the film happens, and as the titles begin to roll, the song comes. Right, so it has the power to make you sit back and reflect on the film. You don't get up when Bavraman comes. You want to listen, and it kind of makes you think about the film again. That's the magic of the song, and that's the magic of his voice and the words and the tune. So then we put, when we had Hazaaron Khwaishein Aisi and Bavraman, right? So Baniye Bavra sort of followed from there, and followed from, I mean, people just kind of thinking alike, and we were sitting, and I had a kind of a rhythm in mind, and Shantanu sort of hit that rhythm, and then he said, why don't we put words in it? So we kind of improvised that song in the recording. We started thinking about it, and then we said, this word, that word, and Swanand started writing. And then we said, who will, then I said, the song you have to have Hazaaron Khwaishein in that song as well. And then there was another assistant of mine. His name was Ajay Jingran, and his voice was fascinating, And I sort of called Ajay to the recording, and then Shantanu used him really brilliantly. And so I kind of, sometimes when you are on the right, if you're listening and you're in the right frame of mind, and if the film is happening, then all your decisions, you are in some state of grace, right? You're respecting the medium, so it loves you back. Then it gives you many things. I like to think of it as, you can't analyze it totally. It happened, and
Sure.
It happened because we were just wanting to make that film, and we were true to that film, and there were nobody else telling us what to do. It's a very ideal state of affairs where you're making a film, which the producer is just telling you, all that Pritish told me is that the film, and I think it was a brilliant piece of advice. He said, Sudhir, because he knew this, he'd grown up in that time. Actually, it's a tribute in a sense to his generation, also in a sense, so about his generation. So, he just told me, don't make it about the costumes. Don't make it about the hairstyles. Make it about the people. So in Hazaaron, we don't exaggerate the side locks.
Right.
We don't exaggerate bell bottoms. It kind of, it's there, but as a suggestion, not as a...
Right.
It doesn't...
The times are projected through the story, through the dialogues.
Then any generation can find themselves in it. It was a very, very remarkable piece of advice from Pritish, I think. And the freedom he gave us was quite remarkable, because he kind of loved that idea of the film and the script.
Right. And what about the casting of the leads? How did you narrow down on 3 leads?
I was quite, I was making a film at Calcutta Mail where I was being controlled a lot, and I needed money, and I was working in the Indian commercial system, and I was just going nuts. And I sort of went into Hazaaron. Luckily, the French also gave me half some of the money, So, which is also a great thing. You have to be grateful to that French system which gave you that money. Where they don't interfere in the film, and they don't interfere in the fact that it has to be. All they say is that maybe you have to either spend some of the money in France or use French people. So that's all the conditions that were there attached to that grant. And the French producer Joel Farge was very kind as well. So I just had this total freedom to do what I want and cast whoever I wanted. So I kind of insisted that everybody should be kind of new. So we went into this whole process. Again, you respect the process, and you try and find the person whom you've written, the idea of the character, and you try and find them. Then you believe that they'll be somewhere. So we found Chitrangada in a screen test. She never acted in a film before. We found Shiny in a screen test and never acted. And I tried looking for a new Siddharth, but and I tried to resist casting KK. But I couldn't find anybody, because KK is not my find. He'd already done Bhopal Express, right? But I think I couldn't find an actor better than him to play that part. And so I settled on him. And finally, I'm very, very glad that I did. And so, it's just, you Sunday, you respect the process, and you search, and you go on, and you're a bit dogged about it, and you persevere. And sometimes luck favors you
there. Right.
You can't imagine the film without Chitrangada's face, can you?
Oh yes, and what a wonderful performance for someone who is doing the first film.
Chinese personality and whatever. And even Ram Kapoor is brilliant, I think.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, all of the ensemble,
I
like
also,
Yashpal Sharma, Ram Kapoor, all of them have done.
yeah, yeah,
Even I thought Sandeep Kulkarni in a very small role was really effective.
yeah. Also, Sandeep was with me, and I had first cast him in Israt Ki Subhani.
Yes,
So,
yes, yes.
yeah. So I mean, yeah. I just found the right people. They all said yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. And finally, Sudhir, I got to ask you this before I let you go. The times we live in are increasingly polarized, and increasingly the discourse, especially on social media, has essentially become, us versus them. You remain one
Yeah.
of the very few kind of a balanced voice of reason on Twitter. So I have two questions for you. First is, how have you managed to survive without drinking either of the two very popular flavors of Kool-Aid? And in your opinion, how can we get
Without what?
without drinking either of the two very popular flavors of Kool-Aid that everybody seems to be drinking?
Yeah.
And my second question was going to be, how can we get otherwise perfectly normal folks to stop drinking the Kool-Aid, both the flavors?
I don't know, man. But if you don't stop, then you're heading for some kind of a disaster.
Yeah. Well, let's
I mean, I
tell us
just
more.
feel
How
that
have
it's
you
become
survived
so
without drinking
toxic.
either of the two?
I don't know. Again, I think it's my background. I mean, I don't think it's conscious. It's just who I am. I think it has a lot to do with my mathematician father. I think it's again luck.
And you say that
It's
as
just that.
your father as being essentially a voice of reason who's steeped in reason and science.
Yeah, and kind of kindness and certain kind of arrogance to stay who you are, and I think it stems from some arrogance also. I mean, I don't know, but it stems from uh, you know I don't know. It must be some default mechanism. Yeah, I have no idea. I really don't know. I mean, I just know
Okay.
who I am, and I'm more or less.
That's just the
That's
way
the
you
way
are.
I think, allowing myself to be who I am and not get swayed. And sometimes I may be getting swayed. I think. I mean, I to all your viewers, whoever who love Hazaaron, and I think I like Khoya Khoya Chand as well, and Dharavi, and sometimes I've not been true to myself and made the films that I was capable of or I should have. And I have promised that from Serious Men onwards, I will stick to being who I am and not get determined by.
Okay. Great. Great. Well, that was great, Sudhir. Thanks a lot again. I really wanted to talk with you about this film, and if time permits, some other time, I would love to do something like this with you for Israt Ki Subhani, which is another film that I like a lot.
So sure. I mean, maybe let me finish my this cut and the edit,
Yes,
and,
yes,
and
absolutely.
as
By
the
the way, the
film goes
first time
into.
when I read your message, when you said, very busy with the post of my new film, the first thing that I thought about was the ringing telephone scene between Vikram and Kashyap. And
Yeah.
I thought is Sudhir Mishra trying to pull a Vikram Malhotra on me? Yeah. But then I knew that yes, you are working on your new film.
Yeah, so I mean, after about a month, the film will go into sound and post where I will come in
Okay.
an intimate please. So then I'll have time. There's no problem.
Sure, sure, sure. Thanks again, Sudhir. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was Sudhir Mishra. If you haven't seen Hazaro, I hope you'll be inclined to watch it after this chat. And if you have seen it before, I hope this chat would have convinced you to revisit. If you have a comment, suggestion, or anything which you would like to add to the conversation held on this episode, do drop me a comment on Twitter. Also, do subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And drop us a review when you get a chance. You can follow me on Twitter at loveofcinemasf8 for podcast-related updates and my tweets on all things movies. That's the episode. This is Himanshu signing off, and like always, thank you for listening to the Love of Cinema podcast.